I wrote an article for Pucker Up Sports about like the things that I think the NHL could do better and the hockey community could do better, because I love going to the Pride Night games. I think they're fun. I like getting the little rainbow shirt, whatever, but that's not enough. And I think that for a long time, I and probably many other people thought it was enough because we weren't used to having a seat at the table, getting that representation. So when we got like this little sliver, we were like, oh, thank God, like they're finally doing something. But now that like those Pride Nights and those rainbow brandings, whatever, have been around for a couple of years, it's kind of like, okay, now what? My name is Jennifer Moglia. I'm 18 years old. I'm from Long Island, New York. I'm a writer. I work in social media, starting to work in PR. I just graduated high school yesterday, actually. So that's pretty cool.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'll be going to Quinnipiac University in the fall as a communications and media studies major. And as far as my connection to sports hockey, I've written for a couple different hockey publications over the years. I wrote for Fansided's Ranger site, Blue Line Station. I wrote for a site called Puck It Up, which was just an independent site run by a couple of girls. And I'm currently doing a podcast for and doing social media for Pucker Up Sports, which is a hockey sports publication run entirely by women and gender diverse people. So that's pretty much me.
I love that. I love that so much. Actually, my degree is in communication and sport communication. So,
Oh, perfect.
yeah. How did Jennifer get into hockey?
So my dad really got me into sports from a very young age. I went to my first baseball game when I was 3, I think. So it's pretty much always been in my life. And hockey was, as much as my dad got me into it, I stumbled upon like hockey Tumblr, hockey Twitter, like the kind of fandom side of it when I was probably 12 or 13 years old, like finishing middle school, going into high school. Um, and I didn't have a ton of friends like at my school, so when I was starting to make friends on Twitter, it was a lot of it was through the Rangers, because they're the team that I watch. And just starting to make friends through that, and we would stay up late on Skype because Zoom wasn't a thing yet, so we would do Skype calls. And I made a lot of friends through it, which was really cool. And I went to my first NHL game when I was, I think, 14. It was the Rangers Caps game and they lost, but it's okay. But that game, after seeing like hockey in person instead of on TV, like that was just so cool and surreal for me. And I ended up going to a ton more games after that. I went to a bunch of Ranger games with my dad, and my mom's husband at the time was a big Islander fan. So I would go to games with him. He told me pick a player on the roster, so that'll be the guy that you root for. Obviously, that was Ryan Strome, as we can see in my background. And so, yeah, I've really gotten to know him over the years. I have like every jersey of his ever, because I was like, how am I going to wear an Islander jersey? So I have like his AHL All-Star jersey. I have like his OHL jersey, like everything. So yeah, I guess I would say, it started out with my dad, but like hockey Tumblr, hockey Twitter, like the fandom side of it is what really like attracted me to it and got me into it. And making friends and finding like career opportunities through it too was something that like really heightened my love for it.
What do you love about it?
So for me, hockey started out as a distraction from things that were going on in my life. Obviously, getting into it in such a turbulent time as like end of middle school, beginning of high school, so many things are happening in your life at that point. And for me, when I was watching hockey, it was like, okay, this is like a 3-ish hour block of my day where like I don't have to do anything. I don't have to think about homework or school or friends or whatever. Like it was just something that I could like really like hyper focus in on and just become really invested in it. And obviously it's exciting. Like, why do we like watching sports? We get invested in it. So that was really what it was for me in the beginning. Is it was this kind of crutch, this kind of distraction that I used. And it brought me all these other amazing things, as I mentioned earlier, but that's really what started out as. And now, I mean, as a writer and as somebody who likes to tell stories, like that aspect of hockey and sports in general really appeals to me. Of good guys versus bad guys, and who comes out on top, and individual player stories, things I've had to overcome, especially like right now as we're coming to Stanley Cup final and like the end of the playoffs. I love playoff stories. What team was seated really low and ends up going really far. I think the Islanders, for as much as I just said, I'm a Ranger fan, I think the Islanders had a great story this year. So I think it started out as one thing. It was kind of like this crutch and this distraction for me. And I've kind of grown with it over the years, and I have a very different relationship with it now. But I think sports are magical and exciting and fun. And I think if you're not watching sports through that lens, I think you're doing it wrong.
I love it. Based off your intersection of identities, how could hockey be better for you? And also, how could it be better for the queer community?
Right. So I'll go off of like my specific identity first, and then I'll go deeper into it. So I have GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, which a lot of people have. And yeah. And so when I say that hockey was this crutch and this distraction for me, it really started to come into my life when I was like first starting to go to therapy, first getting my diagnosis, having my first panic attacks, figuring out how I wanted to deal with that. And so, for something that helped me with my mental health so much, I feel like there isn't really a ton of mental health awareness that goes on within the NHL specifically. I feel like with the NWHL, you see it a little bit more. They talk about a little bit more through campaigns and things like that. But I remember when I was first getting into the sport again, like 12, 13, 14 years old, I had found the Canadian teams were doing like the Hockey Talks campaign, like in conjunction with the Bell Let's Talk stuff. And that was something that like really struck me, because it was these players. I think like Johnny Gaudreau was in one of the videos, and it was just, and of course it was like scripted things and they're telling them what to say, but him saying like, you're not alone, or like reach out for help, things like that. That's something that really impacted me, like at a young and impressionable age, saying, oh, like this person that I look up to, that I watch on TV every night, is being open about this thing that I go through. Yeah, essentially what I was saying is that I don't think Bell Let's Talk Day is enough. I think we've started to see kind of the problems with that. That there's this one day a year where everybody kind of says like, yeah, let's raise money for mental health, and then it kind of goes away until the next January. And I don't think that's a good thing, obviously. So I definitely think there needs to be more mental health awareness in hockey as a whole. I mean, we see stories like Derek Bugard and Rick Rippon, and we don't want those things to happen again, obviously. So that's as far as like my personal identity goes. And then, for Pride Month, the queer community, I identify as pansexual, and I came out about a year ago. And I wrote an article for Pucker Up Sports about like the things that I think the NHL could do better and the hockey community could do better, because I love going to the Pride Night games. I think they're fun. I like getting the little rainbow shirt, whatever, but that's not enough. And I think that for a long time, I and probably many other people thought it was enough, because we weren't used to having a seat at the table, getting that representation. So when we got like this little sliver, we were like, oh, thank God, like they're finally doing something. But now that like those Pride Nights and those rainbow brandings, whatever, have been around for a couple of years, it's kind of like, okay, now what? Like that was the first step. Where do we go from there? And I think what it comes down to is a lot of these teams or these leagues or these organizations just really need to work on like putting their money where their mouth is, kind of thing. I mean, we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, like the teams that are partnering with Chick-fil-A, right? Like, how are you gonna, right? Like, how are you gonna have a Pride Night and have rainbow shirts and then give money to this stupid? So I guess to sum it up, it's just really about putting your money where your mouth is, and inclusion and representation are the name of the game. You can't say that you're all for queer people and then your entire staff front office is made up of straight cis white men. Like that's just not, doesn't make sense. So yeah, I think that there's been a lot of good in the past couple of years, and there have been some steps forward, but I just think that there's a ways to go for sure.
I completely agree, and I think the steps are lovely, and I don't want to put them down because they are steps, but I think as a community, we can't settle for crumbs.
Exactly.
That said, knowing all that, what keeps you in hockey?
That's like a hard question. Because I did kind of get disconnected from hockey like my junior into my senior. So I just finished up my senior, so probably like a year or two ago. I was kind of feeling disconnected from the sport because, for like some personal things, like some of the people that I had met through the sport really weren't the best people for one reason or another, which is fine. I have a bunch of amazing people that I've met through hockey, but you run into people that maybe don't have your best interests in mind and maybe don't treat you the best. And that can happen in any aspect of your life. But because that was happening to me kind of through hockey, it was like I had this association with the sport where I was like, do I want to go to a game where I'm going to see these awful people? Which is a whole other story. But, I was getting to this point where I was like, I'm not interested anymore. Like it kind of made me sad to think about. And obviously like teams change, players leave, you trade players, and like the Rangers teams that I kind of got attached to were pretty much gone. So it was hard. They always bring up like the picture of all of them with the President's Trophy, and it's like all the faces crossed out of all the players that left. So I was like, a lot of these players that I was watching aren't here anymore. I don't really have the most positive association with the sport anymore. And so I had a period of time where I was pretty disconnected from it. And what kind of brought me back in was getting more involved with the NWHL, which they have their own problems on their own, which I talk about ad nauseum on the podcast for Pucker Up. But, going to NWHL games, and I've been going to games since 2015 when the league started, but really going to more games and talking to the players and getting involved, it was, that's part of the reason why I think representation is so important, was because I was seeing people who looked like me, acted like me, had mental illnesses like me, so it was very cool to kind of like see myself in these people that I look up to. And there are so many great people that work in the NWHL, like Anya Battaglino Packers, like somebody that comes to mind. She's amazing. I've had some great conversations with her. She and Madison Packer, they're both great. Mia Dench, who used to play for the Riveters, she's really great. We had a lot of great conversations, and just like through meeting these people through the NWHL and going to more games, that was like, okay, like I remember why I love this sport so much, kind of thing. And the thing that really like motivates me and drives me is that I want hockey to be a better place when I leave it than when I found it. Like I said earlier, the front offices and the staffs are filled with straight white cisgender men. I don't want that to be the case, when I'm working or when I'm older. And so I just think that's what keeps me going. There are days where we're going to record the pod and I'm like, really don't feel like doing it. Kind of want to take a nap, which understandable. But I kind of tell myself, if there's one young girl who finds our podcast and sees these three women talking about sports, maybe she can think to herself, that's something that I can do. And that's kind of what keeps me going and what keeps me coming back, is I want this to be better when I leave it than it was when I found it.
I love that. What gives you hope for queer people in the sport?
I think that it's people more than it is like leagues and organizations, because like I think most of us could agree by saying the NHL doesn't give us a ton of hope with what they do for Pride Month. But like this project is a big example of it. The fact that you're doing this and you're putting in the work to amplify voices of queer people rather than just allies like the NHL is doing. I think that gives me a lot of hope. I think people like Harrison Brown and Jessica Platt, the stuff that they've done the past couple years. I just saw a video yesterday that Harrison Brown's gloves are in the Hockey Hall of Fame. That's insane. But yeah, basically what I was just saying is it's specific people that really give me hope. And when those people, lead into groups of people, obviously grow, things get bigger. I talk about Harrison Brown a lot just because I met him a bunch of times when he was playing for the Riveters, and just seeing like, obviously I'm not trans, I'm pansexual, queer, same blanket, whatever. But seeing somebody that was kind of under that same umbrella as me playing a professional sport was really cool for me. And we kind of had like this little friendship. I would see him after the games. I have a pride flag on my night table that he like signed for me. So you know, it's somebody like him. It's somebody like Jessica Platt. I just got to interview for Pucker Up, which was amazing. And it's not just them. There are a million other more people I could name. But it really is specific individuals who are putting in the work and lifting themselves and other people up, is what's giving me hope.
Well, you're giving me hope. This interview is giving me hope. All these interviews have given me hope. But like seeing somebody as young as you are, doing the work, thinking critically, and sharing messages and amplifying and uplifting communities is so powerful. And Jennifer, I'm so grateful to you, for you. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for taking part.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.